Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Twins Daily's Offseason Live. Tonight, we are going to be talking about free agent starting pitcher targets. My name is Nick Nelson of TwinsDaily.com, joined tonight by a couple of Twins Daily's top contributors here to have a little discussion about the free agent pitchers on the market, who the Twins might go after, the merits of the cases for and against those players. And we certainly welcome you all to join the conversation. It is very much interactive. So thanks for tuning in. We hope you stick with us and talk a little baseball here on this Thursday evening in early November. First to join us here, it's Twins Daily's head editor, Mr. Tom Fremming. Tom, how are you doing this evening, sir?
Yo, how's it going? Good to talk baseball. Good to be here. Good to see you.
It's Froming, right? Is it Froming? How are you pronounce your last name?
It gets tricky with baseball people because my family does pronounce it Froming, but I feel like the umpire Bruce Framing, and I think he changed the pronunciation during his career at one point, but it was never so it's tricky for baseball people, but it's Froming, yes.
Okay, all right. I'll try to remember that. As I mentioned, Tom is our head editor at Twins Daily, indispensable. Matt Braun is a writer at Twins Daily. He's our head of something. What would you say he's our head of, Tom? I don't know, Snark.
Snark. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Taylor Austin fan club, maybe. I don't know. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. What would I be the head of? I'll have to think about that one.
Analytics.
Analytics. Hey, I saw those comments. You know what I saw? I saw clicks, baby. That's all I saw.
Yes, he can definitely be our head of analytics tonight. So just to give you guys a little idea of the show here, it's called Offseason Live. We do it a couple times a week, a live show broadcasting on several different social media platforms. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about some of the players in this free agent market who the Twins might pursue, get a little preview of the offseason here, talk about what that would do to the roster for 2021. And you guys, if you're watching from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, what have you, your comments, we can see them. They'll pop up on our feed here. And we love to interact with you. We love to pull your comments up on the screen. If there's guys from the list we'll show you that you like, let us know. We'll bring them up. Or if you think some of the guys we're bringing up, if you're a fan, if you're not a fan, let us know your opinion. We want to get to everyone's voices in here. Before I get started here, before I get any further, I do have to take this opportunity to make a small plug. I wrote a book. It's called Versus. Published a book this week on Monday. It's called Versus, 25 head-to-head battles that shaped the evolution of video games. Illustrated by my good friend Gerald Spencer Jr. Full color, all kinds of illustrations. It's really cool. If you like video games at all, or you know anyone in your life that does, it's a great Christmas gift. So it's available via paperback and ebook at versusbook.com. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the free agent relief pitching market. So just to set this up a little bit, here's kind of the situation we're looking at as Twins fans. It is likely that Tyler Duffy, who is arbitration eligible pretty cheap, is going to return. Same deal with Matt Whistler. Jorge Alcala, of course, was a very nice piece of that Twins bullpen as a rookie. He'll be back without question. And we expect that Caleb Thielbar, who had a great return this year, is also going to be rejoining the ranks. So that fills about 4 of those bullpen spots if you assume all those guys are mostly locked in. Taylor Rogers is a little bit of an uncertainty. We talked about him in the arbitration episode. He's online to make about $6 or $7 million in arbitration this year. And with some of the names we're going to be talking about, and especially a AL Central left-hand relief rival that we know pretty well, who did not have his $10 million option activated, there's a little question about whether the Twins are going to take that and whether that's really a good market value. Even though Rogers is a good pitcher, I don't think any of us have totally lost faith in him. But we'll talk about him as well. Hitting this free agent pool, Trevor May, Sergio Romo, Tyler Clippard. The key thing I think here, guys, is that May, Romo, Clippard, those 3 alone accounted for more than a quarter of the Twins' bullpen innings this year and a much higher percentage than that of their high leverage innings. You got those guys going, possibly Rogers going. That is the Twins' late inning entourage there that's just going potentially into free agency, and those are a lot of high leverage innings to fill. So as I look at this bullpen picture and we start this conversation, my real thought is the Twins need to secure some pretty high-powered arms to bring into this mix. Tom, do you agree?
Yeah, and I'm kind of a bullpen nerd, but so maybe I'm a little skewed on this. But to be honest, this is the area of the team that as we look at the roster right now, before any additions are made, I'm most concerned about, to be completely honest with you, because like the absolute worst thing as a baseball fan is to watch a good team with a bad bullpen. It just is soul crushing to lose games late. And exactly.
Nick, you said a good team.
Yeah, true.
Well, other than the bullpen, they would have been
might be listening.
Team.
Go easy here.
So yeah, I'm concerned. They need to do some stuff, especially if they let Rogers go. I do think this market's going to be pretty good for bullpens. And this front office, I've been frustrated by how they've built a bullpen in the past, and then all of a sudden it's like one of the better bullpens in the league that they turn out, because they're really good at, like we saw with Whistler, they're really good at identifying these guys and getting them in the role, and then sort of figuring out what they're best at. So it's a really interesting the way this front office has built bullpens.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how they approach this market. To your point, it's going to be a deep market. We see three big names from the Twins, possibly four, going into the market here, and that's a trend around the game. There were a lot of options for relief pitchers that seemed pretty easy to take. Cam Bedrosian is another guy who's not, I don't think, going to be directly talked about, but a guy with the Angels who had been a good setup man. Had a $3 million option and had it declined by the Angels, and there's just sort of this trend around the game. So a lot of talent out there potentially available at a value. What's kind of your high-level thought as you look at the Twins bullpen picture here, Matt, and we kind of start this conversation about who they might want to add?
Yeah, so I think something that they kind of need, and I know it kind of goes back to an old school thinking, but actually I'd say they need velocity. Because you look at those guys, look at Duffy, you look at Whistler. I mean, not high velo guys. Effective, certainly, not high velo, not Thielbar. Rogers, high velo for a lefty. And, of course, Alcala, we saw hit 100. I think even 101 at one point. But May's probably your second highest strikeout, highest velocity guy that's going. And we just watched an entire postseason where arm after arm was coming out. And people, who's Peter Fairbanks and why is he throwing 100? Like, it was exactly that. Yeah, Nick Anderson, a guy with the Twins left, but maybe let's not bring that up. But anyways, kind of my point is I think you have to focus on velocity, but it's going to be tough because velocity tends to be expensive. So you got to be smart with how you go after that velocity. And we'll see if they can do that. I'm not sure if they can, but let's hope they can.
Yeah, I think we'll be talking about a few guys here who have a little bit of velocity. So there's definitely some names out there that are worth looking at. Speaking of which, we mentioned it's a very deep market this year on this offseason free agency relief pitching group. So I'm bringing up a list here on the screen. This is far from complete list, but just gives you a little bit of a high-level view of some of the guys out there. You got Liam Hendriks, maybe the best relief pitcher in the game at the top. Brad Hand, who, as I mentioned earlier, was somewhat surprisingly, had his option declined by Cleveland. Trevor Rosenthal, one of those hard throwers that Matt likes. Alex Colomé, Blake Trainin, Kirby Yates, Sean Doolittle, Brandon Workman, Greg Holland, Shane Green, Mark Melanson, Twins own Trevor May. Lots of names on here. A lot of recognizable names, a lot of fairly appealing names. And we're going to dive into some of them. So the way, folks, that we're going to do this is I've asked both of my fellow panelists, and I myself have also picked out three names of relief pitchers that we like from this market that we think are good fits for the Twins, and we could see them maybe pursuing this offseason. So we're going to go ahead and make cases for those guys. And the other two panelists will voice their agreement or disagreement about whether they think that's a good pick, whether it's a fit for the Twins. And we've kind of aligned them across three tiers. So the first pick from each of us is a what I would say sort of a shoot for the stars kind of pick, maybe someone at that Taylor Rogers level or above, a real free agent relief star who you could bring in to be that ninth inning guy maybe, especially if Rogers is gone. The second guy is going to be more of a middle tier, someone that you can get in that Tyler Clippers, Sergio Romo range, maybe, $2 to $5 million. And the third guy is going to be a little bit of a sleeper, maybe someone who's going to be available on a minor league contract or a very low guaranteed deal. So that's kind of the setup. And with that, we're going to dive into the first pick on our list. Tom is going with Kirby Yates, a right-handed pitcher, formerly with the San Diego Padres, 33 years old, through only 4 innings in 2020 here. He had a little bit of a lost injury season, but before that, 2019, maybe the best relief pitcher in baseball. Tom, why don't you give us your case here for Kirby Yates as a fit for the Twins?
Yeah, one of the fun things about this relief pitcher class is there's a really good debate of who is the number 2 behind Liam Hendriks. And there would not have been a debate at all had Kirby Yates even had a sort of normal regular season. He would have easily been if not the 1B to Hendriks' 1A. And I think that is creating a really great buying opportunity for teams to get in on Yates right now, because he did only pitch the 4 innings. It was ugly. Turned out he had bone chips in his elbow. He had surgery to clean those out. All reports are that everything looks perfect in the elbow. Now, I don't know if things didn't look good, if we would hear about that, if that would be really reported out there. But I believe there was even speculation that if San Diego made a deep run in the postseason, that he may have been able to come back and pitch for them this season. So he should have a normal offseason. Again, from 2017 to 2019, he was 4th in Fangraphs WAR among relief pitchers, led Major League Baseball with 41 saves last season in 2019. So, he's a guy you could put into that closer role. And it's not like moving Tyler Duffy in there where you're not sure how he's going to react to it. This is a guy who's done it. He had a 15 K per 9 and a 1.9 walk per 9 in 2019. So this is a guy who both gets strikeouts and just throws a ton of strikes, doesn't barely walk anybody. He's mainly a fastball split change guy, which, we know the Twins with Kenta Maeda's success with that pitch. That's a really effective pitch these days, and the Twins really seem to be able to get the most out of that with Maeda. The 4 1/3 innings this season is there's not really a good way to paint that as a positive. I mean, I guess you could say he's going to be fresh. He did have Tommy John surgery in college, so this was like more than 10 years ago now. And that surgery was just to clean up the bone chips. But, I mean, let's just look at it. Drop the numbers, and let's look at names here. Okay, Minnesota Twins World Series championships with a guy named Kirby on the roster. 2. Okay. Championships without a guy named Kirby. 0. They've never won a championship without a guy named Kirby. So how can you not love this pick?
I mean, that's a pretty foolproof argument. So you're saying that Kirby is going to put the bullpen on his back. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
All right. Matt, can you see that happening? How do you feel about Kirby Yates for the Twins?
I mean, that's rock solid logic coming out of Tom, man. I can't even argue with that. But for the real, I actually I agree with Tom. I love Yates as a bounce back candidate. I really like, and I'm not even sure the effectiveness of relievers. This might just be a personal bias, but I really love buying relievers on bounce back seasons, just because I feel like their natural volatility. Wow, I said that word correctly. Impressive.
Oh, nice.
I'm impressed with myself. Just the natural tendency to kind of be all over the place makes me a little bit uneasy when buying high on a guy. So I love buying low, and it's like Yates, perfect. I mean, 3.4 F4 season. Once Tom read the numbers, I looked up his Fangraphs page, and it's just insane.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. He's better than most starting pitchers when it comes to those numbers. So I love Yates. The only thing I get worried about is that maybe it's one of those things where every team's going to think that same thing, where it's like, oh, here's this guy, perfect bounce back candidate, and that's going to inflate his market just a little bit. But I guess we'll see how that plays out. I think that just might be me thinking too much into it.
Yeah, there's no denying the luster of this name, Kirby Yates. I mean, by the numbers the past few years, he was as good as it gets. The idea of getting a guy like that and sliding him in the bullpen alongside, Taylor Rogers to maybe have that similar kind of setup where you have a bit of a righty-lefty 9th inning situation like they had with Romo. This is just a big upgrade over Romo, basically. Whether you want to use him like that, kind of use him in that Tyler Duffy bullpen ace earlier innings role. He gives you a lot of options. And I think what I really like, Tom, we're going to talk about in this first kind of wave, these first 3 very established, very high-end closer relief pitchers. Yates, I think, could be very affordable. One theme that we're going to talk about in this entire conversation is that the free agent market is in for a rough winter. We all kind of know that. I think the bullpen, the relievers are especially going to have a tough time. For this reason, I mean, first of all, there's just a lot of supply. But also, the only teams, especially in a climate like this, that are going to spend on their bullpen is bona fide contenders. There's just no reason for a team that's not a contender to go throw money at a guy like Kirby Yates. So his market's going to be pretty limited. The Twins have enough bullpen depth to maybe take a bit of a risk on him. To me, maybe the risk is a little too much. He's getting there into his mid-30s and coming off that bad injury, the elbow chips. That's the only thing that kind of worries me, but definitely a name that is very appealing and very exciting. to think about. So a good one to submit. Catching up on the comments here, Greg says, I am sure Mr. Falvey and Levine will do something. Oh, there's no doubt they will. They've got some spots to fill in this bullpen. Blake says, not a reliever, but could you see the Twins targeting James Paxton? It's a possibility. Another guy coming off a bit of a injury-ruined season. We went through a bunch of starting pitching options on the last episode of Offseason Live. Tom was on it. He had some names that he submitted. I don't know if Paxton was a name among the names you guys submitted.
We didn't talk about him. It's just, we're sort of keying in on certain guys. He didn't come up, but certainly a guy who's interesting. And I just want to have one more Yates point. The projections from Fangraphs, they're guessing he's going to get a 2-year, $10 million deal, and MLB Trade Rumors has him down for 1 year, $5 million. So that just seems insane to me that a guy of this, if that's, you can build a bullpen this offseason if that's what the prices are going to be. You can build it from top down. You could build an entire bullpen.
Yeah, I think on our Twins daily payroll tool, we had him pegged at maybe 7 or 8 million, which even that seems like a pretty good bargain. But yeah, I mean, at that rate, geez, you could get quite a reliever for that money. So I think we're liking Kirby Yates. That's a good name and a fun one out there on the market. Let's move on to Matt's first pick. It's Brad Hand, who we mentioned before, hitting free agency because his $10 million option with Cleveland was declined, despite another phenomenal season, been one of the best closers in the league for several years running, led the AL in saves this year. A lot of people were surprised by that, but I think it speaks A, to the stinginess of Cleveland, and B, to the market we're looking at this offseason, because especially he passed through outright waivers. They gave any team the ability to take on that contract and give him a 1 year, $10 million deal while giving up nothing, and nobody did it. So it's not just Cleveland, which tells you that maybe Hand is going to be had at a pretty good deal, and maybe a lot of these guys are. And I assume, Matt, maybe that's something that you kind of like about him. What stands out to you otherwise about Brad Hand as maybe coming aboard for the Twins?
Well, first of all, there's the obvious Minnesota connection. Of course, he's born from the state, so that just seems natural. But just he kind of does already feel like a sort of reliever the Twins target, because if you think back to all the guys they've signed, for better or for worse, when it comes to the bullpen, Blake Parker, I think about Fernando Rodney, you think about I guess they did re-sign Sergio Romo. They acquired Sergio Romo, Tyler Clippard. A lot of guys, you don't see a whole lot of high velocity, really rely on off speed, either a changeup or a slider type, and they tend to throw that pitch a lot. And Brad Hand fits that mold perfectly, throws a lot of sliders, I believe about 50% of the time. That's been pretty consistent over the last few years. And just everything with you said, Nick, with the money that the Indians didn't pay him, and the fact that no other team didn't want to pay him is kind of telling. When the only real chink in the armor for him was the fact that his velocity on his fastball is down just a little bit, but all the numbers were just phenomenal still. So I guess long story short, I like him also in the Yates role, where you can put him as the closer, you can put him as the Rogers relief role last year, or Duffy this year, or wherever you want, and he's just a fireman. Just put him in whenever, and he'll probably do well.
Yeah, interestingly, I believe Brad Hand was Kirby Yates' predecessor as closer for the Padres before going to Cleveland. So a little continuity there between these picks. Tate agrees with you, Matt. He says the Twins should sign Brad Hand. I think he looks like a good fit as well. Now, Matt, in your mind, do you see Brad Hand replacing Taylor Rogers in this bullpen, or more ideally complimenting him? I
mean, if you got a compliment, dude, thoughts and prayers for any lefty trying to hit the Twins late innings. My goodness. Actually, now I'm thinking about what lefties are terrorizing us. I have to think about that later.
That is, not a lot in the AL Central. That is, I guess, the argument against it. But both very good against righties and lefties.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess the entire White Sox lineup is right-handed. But as far as I'm aware, he doesn't have extreme splits, and Rogers used to not have extreme splits, so it shouldn't be much to worry about.
All right. Well, we'd love to hear what the rest of you think about Brad Hand, a bit of a surprising free agent, and of course a Minnesota native, as Matt mentioned, a 3-time All-Star, a guy who's been very consistently dominant out of the bullpen in the 9th inning. Tom, any holdups with Brad Hand? Anything that maybe gives you a reservation? It's very easy to see the allure.
I don't get how he cleared waivers. $10 million may seem like a lot, but if it's only on a 1-year deal and the guy's 30, it sounds like a really great opportunity for somebody. Maybe if not a perfect fit for the Twins right now with the Rogers situation not decided yet. But I mean, just look at those numbers down at the bottom there. And as a closer, yeah, he's left-handed, but he's not playing matchups as a closer. He's facing whoever is out there in the ninth inning. 2.05 ERA, 0.77 WHIP, 11.9 K per nine, 1 point. What else do you want? Like, I get that the velocity's down and that's a concern, but when you're pitching that effectively, like, who cares? I'm blown away that nobody picked him up off waivers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I know that there was concerns about him for a while. He had a rough second half in 2019, and then he kind of came out of the gates rough this year. And you're like, you see the fastball velocity declining, and you're like, well, maybe hand is sliding a little bit, like a lot of relievers do at this age. I think Glenn Perkins was around this area when he started to slide. But then, I mean, Brad Hand in the second half, after a few outings this year, he was just ridiculous, unbelievable in like the last 5 or 6 weeks for Cleveland. So pretty hard to say that he's falling off in any way. I think he's hitting the market with some steam, but it's just who knows what he's going to get. I would love to hear some guesses as to what we think. I mean, $8 million. I mean, that's not that far from 10. So why wouldn't someone claim him? I mean, it's hard to say. Tate says he could totally replace Rogers. Blake says the connection to MN as well and would still love it, but a righty to pair with Rogers would be nice. Maybe someone like Kirby Yates. So the only holdup with me is the price, I guess. Matt, any kind of guess at what Brad Hand might get on this market?
Dude, I have absolutely no idea how everything's about to go.
No.
I don't even think the teams themselves know, so I'm just going to back off on that.
Okay,
I think this is especially tough with relievers. It really will dictate like who comes out first and gives out the first bigger contract to an established reliever. I think that will kind of set the market. And because that's the case, it may take forever for any of these guys to sign. With that being the case.
I think that's going to be the case in general. I think this relief market is just going to be ice cold all winter, unfortunately, for these guys. Moving on to the last of our first group of guys here is my pick. It is putting the cart before the horse there. It's Liam Hendriks, right-handed closer, previous of the Oakland A's, a former Twin. He was pretty unbelievable in 2020. 25.1 innings, 1.78 ERA, 0.67 WHIP, 13.1 K per nine, 1.1 walks per nine. Pretty good argument to be made that Liam Hendriks is simply the best relief pitcher in baseball. He leads all major league relievers since the start of 2019 in Fangraphs wins above replacement. Been very consistent. He's been good in the playoffs. We saw him have some big moments for Oakland in the playoffs this year. He's got a good deep arsenal, a hard fastball, sharp breaking stuff, gets tons of strikeouts, great command. I think obviously the holdup with him is going to be the price. He is the top reliever on the market. He's going to get paid how much? I mean, per these past discussions, his wage could be very suppressed, which to me seems like quite the opportunity. If you can net a relief pitcher of this caliber for, I don't know, even $11-12 million, that would be an amazing deal for Liam Hendriks. And about the same as you would pay for Rogers and Romo, which was kind of your two-headed closer last year. I mean, this guy is the best closer in the league. I am a little nervous about the volatility of relief pitchers in general, but Liam Hendriks does not seem like a guy who's going to fall off to me. He's got such good stuff, such good command, such good poise out there. I'm a big fan. I'd love to bring him back to Minnesota. Matt, let's start with you. What's anything that kind of gives you pause about Liam Hendriks?
The fact that he's a reliever. I mentioned this before with how, signing these kind of guys always makes me nervous because with relievers especially, they look so great until they don't. And then oftentimes you'll see it's not a slow, gradual decline as they age gracefully and you can put them in the retirement home. It's straight to hell. You're not coming back from it. As hard as that, as rude as that kind of may be, that's just kind of my thought process on this is when I see like the number one reliever, I'm just like, okay, that's the guy I'm not touching. I'm looking at everyone else just because I don't like doing that. I just don't want to hand out that contract. And I know I did this last time I was on, but ask the Cubs how they feel about signing Craig Kimbrell, because he had the same thing. Great stuff. Was perfect for a few years and now he's terrible. So I don't know.
I mean, that's absolutely a valid point and clearly the number one holdup here. If you pay the most, if you sign Liam Hendriks, it means you're willing to pay him more than anyone else. You're on the hook for all that money. A huge percentage possibly of whatever limited availability and flexibility the Twins have to spend this offseason on quite a few different needs, quite a few different holes to fill. So I just, when I look at the closer position, when I look at the Twins roster, and I'm not like a closer, shutdown closer guy, but it looks like, that top relief ace guy to even put ahead of Tyler Duffy is their number one need to me. I feel pretty good about the rotation as it stands. I feel fine about the offense, even without Nelson Cruz. But they were a little shaky in the ninth with Rogers and Romo last year, and they possibly are losing both those guys this year. So I think bringing in a shutdown closer who I trust a lot in Hendriks is a guy who could really put them over the top. Tom, what are your thoughts?
It's always hard to argue against the top dog. I mean, this dude is the dude. But like Matt said, that's about the best argument you can come against is that just relievers. He's gonna get a multi-year deal, and that worries me. I always think of Addison Reed now. Whenever I think of giving a reliever a multi-year deal, if you look at his career leading up to when the Twins signed him, he looked like about as safe of a relief pitcher you could possibly sign. He had some velo dipping going on, but still another guy who was really performing. And then he didn't even make it through the first year of his contract with the Twins before he completely fell off. Not that he's very similar to Liam Hendriks in their arsenal or anything, but there just always is that concern. In addition, with the Cubs with Kimbrel, the Rockies basically threw multi-year money at a bunch of different relief pitchers, Wade Davis, Brian Shaw. I think there was another one in there, and that didn't work out either. There's just a lot of precedent of throwing big money at relief pitchers and having it not work. And yeah, if you're a team that's going to have like a $200 million payroll, you can do that stuff. Like the Dodgers gave Blake Trinan $10 million to pitch like the seventh inning for him this year. So those teams can kind of play around with that stuff. I don't know that the Twins can really do that. But yeah, I mean, Liam Hendriks is going to get what he deserves to get, I think.
It is going to be a spicy meatball to take a bite of if you want to go into the Liam Hendriks area of this free agent pool. I don't know that the Twins are the type of team to do that necessarily, if I'm just being honest. So this might be a little bit of a long shot. If we want to go with maybe a more realistic potential, very strong reliever from this Oakland A's bullpen that the Twins might be able to acquire via free agency, let's move on to Tom's next choice here. First on the second tier of the mid-tier relievers, it's Yusmeiro Petit, a right-handed pitcher, 35 years old, through 21 and 2/3 innings for Oakland, with a 1.66 ERA. That's in that Liam Hendriks range. 1.11 whip, a little bit of a lower strikeout rate at 7.1 K per nine, 2.1 walks per nine. A durable, steady veteran who's been around the block. Tom, give us some of the qualities you like about Mr. Petit.
This is a guy that no one will be excited about if the Twins sign him. This is essentially the Tyler Clippard signing. Nobody was like jacked up about Tyler Clippard, but how many key innings did Tyler Clippard pitch for the Minnesota Twins in 2020? And Petit, like Clippard, has a very long, very established record of being a quality major league pitcher. Yes, he's going to be 36 actually later this month. But his last 4 seasons, he's pitched to a 2.74 ERA and 0.94 whip. That is a sample of 289 innings pitched that he's done that over. And get this, over that stretch, he has saved 4 games. So this is a guy who's really been used a lot as a bridge, but from sort of, and he'll get going right in the middle of an inning. He'll pitch the 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever. If your starter gets into trouble, you need to go to somebody. This is a guy who can get hot quick and sort of be that bridge to your actual sort of late inning bullpen guys. And not everybody can really do that. And he has a very established track record of doing that. Again, over that stretch, he has that 4-year stretch, 8.3 K per nine. Not really exciting, but when you pair that with a 1.6 walk rate, that's a very high floor relief pitcher. It's not a guy who's going to be giving up big innings very often. And yeah, he led Major League Baseball with 80 games pitched in 2019, which is just something you don't see anymore nowadays. He's pitched the most games in all of baseball since the start of 2018. Yeah, the only concern is he really had a bad postseason. In the regular season, he only gave up 4 earned runs over 21 and 2/3 innings. Then he gave up more earned runs in the 6 earned runs in the postseason in 4 1/3 innings. So really a bad taste in his mouth coming after that. But I think,
Sounds like a Twins pitcher already.
And that's the problem too. When we're looking at guys, we're probably thinking, well, who's going to help them really go far in the postseason? That's the next step with this organization. So that is a pretty big bummer that he really tailed off for Oakland this year. But again, he's that Clippard mode guy who just is sort of your kind of blandish middle reliever who's never going to be a late inning guy, but who's going to really pitch a lot of innings for you and pitch quality innings.
Well, I think people are going to be jacked up about that pitch there. A blandish middle innings guy. We got Roger wanting to go back. We should sign Liam Hendriks. I think he's having he wants to go back to the previous excitement. No, I think Petit's he's a veteran. As you mentioned, a very durable guy who's thrown a lot of innings, made a lot of appearances. Very functional reliever. That would be probably a low cost addition to this bullpen.
That should be his nickname. Functional reliever.
Unfortunately, in the postseason, it sounds like he was more petite than Petit. Is that okay? All right, yeah, no. Anyways, Matt, give us some thoughts on Yusmeiro Petit.
That was quite the deep dig there. I appreciate that. Petit is, man, he's so interesting because his first year in 2006 with the Marlins, his average fastball velocity was 88.7. This last year with the Athletics, 8.2. I don't know what to make of that. I have never seen that before in my life. But pretty much everything Tom said, this guy's been durable. He's proven, was a starter at one point, then kind of quasi starter, long relief guy, and now is kind of just a relief / somewhat long relief guy if needed. But I pretty much agree with everything Tom said. He's not going to excite anyone. He's going to be a lot like Tyler Clippard in that regard, but it's hard to argue against his track record. The only thing that makes me nervous is his peripherals this year were awful. And then, like you said, maybe we saw that come to steam and come ahead in the playoffs where he just ran out. Granted, he did also face the Houston Astros, who are pretty good, even when they're not cheating. But I don't know. At the end of the day, if you're asking me, would I like to sign Petit? If I woke up and I got on Twitter and I saw Ken Rosenthal said the Twins have signed Yusmeiro Petit, I think I'd be okay with it.
Yeah. I think we'd all have to agree with that.
See, it'd be like sort of raising that floor up. So if you're not really sure that Matt Whistler is as legit as he looked, or not really sure that Alcala's as legit as he looked, this is a guy who can really you just can lock him in and be like, well, we got this guy.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point to make because when we looked at that bullpen outlook going forward, the Twins are losing Clippard, May, Romo. These are established, reliable, to whatever extent, guys. And the guys they've got left over, Caleb Thielbar wasn't pitching a year ago. He had a good, year during this short season. Matt Whistler, we saw it over a short season. Can we see it over a full season? I don't know. Alcala's got things to prove. Some of their young guys, Stashak and Edouard Colina, might enter the mix at some point. But I think that's why this conversation is an important one to have because they need to get some sort of veteran, floor-raising type players, as Tom put it, into this picture. One thing I'm going to throw out there, Tom, I know you mentioned that Yusmeiro Petit leads all of baseball in appearances over the last 2 seasons. I would just like to make this point. Do you know who led all of baseball in appearances in 2016 and 2017?
I don't.
It's a guy you brought up earlier, Addison Reed. So, so a lot of workload for a guy in his mid-30s. You can burn out at any time. So I guess in a market that should be pretty deep, that's the thing that makes me a little bit nervous about Petit. I see Ron says here, with so many relief arms available this offseason, I think teams will wait till someone jumps in to set the market value. They will have a large pool to pick from after 4 or 5 have signed. Not a big fan of spending big on one relief pitcher. So Ron, understandably, is probably not on board with the Liam Hendriks plan. And I think we're going to see that. I think a lot of these guys we're talking about are going to be sort of collected at the end of the offseason. And it is going to be a matter of who can you get the best deal on to an extent. But some of these guys might be worth just jumping on because I have to imagine them and their agents have a pretty good idea of what's coming too. And if you throw a decent guarantee out there, they might be ready to just hop right on that. Let's keep it rolling. Matt's next pick, it's Tommy Hunter, a right-handed pitcher, formerly of the Phillies. Been around for a while, came up as a starter, I believe, in Texas, spent some time in Baltimore. He had a solid season, 24 and 2/3 innings, 4.01 ERA. But, average of strikeout per inning, pretty good control with 2.2 walks per 9, good whip at 1.14. What do you like about the veteran right-hander, Tommy Hunter, Matt?
Tommy Hunter. Tommy Hunter might be the one player more than anyone else who no one would guess has 11 years of major league experience, because he does. And I don't think people even know that. But anyways, I like Hunter. He's not quite a bounce back candidate because he did pitch all of 2020, but didn't pitch much in 2019, which kind of, I think, took him off the radar of a lot of people. What do I like about him? He's just been pretty consistent since moving to the bullpen. I don't have his exact relief numbers, but you just look every year, basically, and you just see about an ERA around 3.5-ish. And hey, there's nothing to complain about if you can have a reliever like that. He's just been consistent. The velocity's dropping off a little bit, which is what you expect, but he kind of negated that by throwing his breaking ball more often, which I think is something that, as I've talked about earlier, the Twins are buying into and are interested in, so he could kind of fit that role. And also, a big thing for me is he used to be a Rays pitcher, and if the Rays like him, then I have no reason not to like him. So.
All right, that's a solid case. I think what stands out to me about Hunter is he looks like a pretty solid Trevor May replacement if May leaves. I think they're going to want to fill that sort of right-handed power arm. And I personally, we talked about this in the Twins Free Agents episode several back. You can go to our YouTube or podcast and catch all the previous episodes. I think that Trevor May is going to be in demand this offseason. He is a high strikeout, high velocity pitcher who's got it on an upwards ascent and still isn't very old and doesn't have a ton of innings on his arm. So I think he's going to get a multi-year deal at a fairly solid rate. And Hunter could be a more reasonable alternative to that. He's not as good, but there's definitely things to like there. Tommy, what do you think about Tommy?
Just rolling back to Trevor May, back to that discussion on who's the second relief pitcher in this market. It might be Trevor May. He might be the number 2 guy. So that's a good point to throw out there. Tommy Hunter, is there some kind of like a Benjamin Button effect that we have going on where he missed all of most of 2019 and then just pitched in this little short 2020 season? Like, for a guy who's 34, is that really a bad thing? And then this also, this totally makes sense with Matt's sort of earlier philosophy of, you don't want to pay for the top guy. You want to almost look for a guy who's undervalued at this point. And Hunter, I think he signed I think he got a multi-year deal that was pretty handsomely paid through the Phillies. That's how he got there. And now kind of coming back into free agency and into this deep class, he is sort of a guy who's just sort of another name in the mix of a bunch of other guys in the same kind of tier. But yeah, I mean, he's probably in that same area as Petit in terms of sort of raising up your floor, but he has more upside certainly than Petit does. So I like that pick quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm with it too. One thing I want to show here, because I was looking when I saw you made this pick, I was looking at Tommy Hunter's StatCast, and I'll bring it up here on the screen. What's really interesting to me about it is, he didn't really rate very well in any categories in 2020. Granted, a small season. Small sample. Look at that fastball spin, 93rd percentile, curveball spin, 88th percentile. And this is not just necessarily a fluke of this year. You go back to 2018, the last time he pitched a full season, 88th percentile for fastball spin, 85th percentile for curveball spin. So we know how this Twins front office likes to operate. Wes Johnson, we saw what they did with Matt Whistler. They see a guy who maybe has something they can do well, and they're really able to play it up and exploit it. So I don't know, Matt, if that's anything that you kind of noticed at all, or you see any potential to maybe move him up a level with the Twins?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually I also looked through all the baseball savant profiles of everyone I chose, and all of them had fastball spin that was 80% or higher. I didn't intend for that, but I guess I just have a second nature when it comes to.
No, you got to. No, you're doing this. Okay, time out.
What's happening?
When somebody sets you up to look good, you just be like, "Yeah, that's exactly." I spent 12 hours.
I'm too humble.
Looking through baseball savant profiles. It was a half day. I stayed up through the whole night, and that is exactly how I found it.
No. What happened was Nick emailed us to send relief arms, and I drunkenly fell out of bed and just typed in 3 names.
No.
And then here we. Oh shoot! Am I on? I can't say it. I shouldn't say it. Wow, where were we? Jeez.
You were talking about noticing that everyone had high curveball spin that you picked, just sort of incidentally. Yeah.
I actually high fastball spin it was. Although we do know it's more spin efficiency that matters rather than pure spin, yada, yada, yada. That's a bunch of nerd stuff. But it is something that interests me. And I kind of made that snarky point of, hey, the Rays liked him, so I liked him. That was probably one of the reasons why the Rays liked him, is they saw a guy with high spin. Granted, I think he was only there for like a year and a half, but that's just kind of how they operate. You're in and then you're out the second you got to make some money. But they were probably along the same lines. I'm not sure how advanced Philadelphia is in being able to take advantage of these characteristics. So maybe the Twins can pounce and say, hey, let's do some things. Let's make some tweaks, and let's make you even better reliever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hunter seems like one of those guys, as Matt mentioned, coming off a little bit of a down year, not necessarily bounce back guy like Kirby Yates, who missed the whole season, but could be a guy who in this deep sort of undifferentiated market, you could get a pretty good deal on. And there's a lot to like there in terms of his reliability and his track record. Last guy of the second batch here, I'm going with Justin Wilson, a left-handed pitcher, a guy who Twins fans might recognize from the AL Central. Pitched for the Mets last year. He's 33. He had a solid year, 19 2/3 innings, 3.66 ERA, 1.37 whip, 10.5 strikeouts per 9, 4.1 walks. So Justin Wilson, I believe he was a closer for a while for the Tigers. He pitched for the Cubs for a little bit, but he's had a good little run in New York with the Mets. He's been solid. He's a lefty, but he can strike out righties and lefties. He's not, necessarily a one-trick pony. And the guy I'm kind of looking at him to replace is possibly that Tyler Clippard role if he doesn't come back, because the Twins are losing their lefty specialist, if you will. That's the role that Clippard was used for. And both these guys are guys who can get lefties out and also get righties out. So I think, Wilson maybe as a compliment for Taylor Rogers, or even if Rogers moves on, he gives you that top lefty, a guy with lots of high leverage, ninth inning experience, a lot of upside. The big question mark with him is his control. But I think the Twins could help him along a little in that regard, and he has dropped his walks per 9 rate in each of the last 2 seasons. So I don't know. Matt, let's start with you. What do you think about Justin Wilson? Any interest?
He's certainly interesting. I was even interested in him when he was a free agent 2 years ago. I forget. All the years kind of just fade at this point. But he interests me. He's been effective consistently for a number of years now. Like you said, the walks are high. I don't know if that's ever going to be something they rein in. That might just be who he is at this point. But he offsets it with a good amount of strikeouts, typically gets good ground balls. As far as I'm aware, doesn't have crazy splits. He's kind of in that Yasmura Petit camp where it's like if I woke up and I saw Ken Rosenthal said the Twins signed Justin Wilson, I'd be like, sure, cool. I'm okay with it. Maybe a little bit more excited than Petit, but you certainly could do a whole lot worse than Wilson, which is a very passive-aggressive way of putting it. You can tell I am from the Midwest. So long story short, I do like him.
Blake says, I like it. Feels cheap. Also add a guy like Yates with him if the money works, and it very well might. You could possibly get Wilson and Yates for the price you'd get like a Liam Hendriks, or for close to the price that you were paying for Romo and Rogers. And these are 2 guys who have been top-tier back-end relief arms in the league. So kind of speaks to the opportunity in front of us this offseason. Tom, what are your thoughts on Justin Wilson?
He's another one of these guys that's been around a really long time and has multiple years of being a productive relief pitcher. That's not that easy to find. So many relievers have a good year or 2 and then flame out. If you can stick it as a relief pitcher in Major League Baseball for as long as guys like this have, it's pretty impressive. The walk rate, as has been mentioned, is very worrisome to me. I hate relievers that walk a bunch of dudes. But Wilson, I don't even get how, but he doesn't give up home runs. So if you walk that many guys and you don't give up home runs, it usually doesn't really come back to bite you, because you're going to really make teams have to earn it by stringing together multiple hits, multiple walks, whatever. He only gave up 1 home run in 2020. I think the most he's ever given up was 6 in a season in his entire career. 480 games pitched. He's given up 32 home runs. So certainly something with, the way he pitches is really makes him difficult to give up home runs. And maybe there's some correlation there. And maybe when he falls behind an account, he says, well, screw it, I'll just walk this guy. I'd rather that than challenge him and give up a home run. So I think this is a guy who's maybe has some more savvy than those numbers would indicate. And even the 1.37 whip doesn't really look good either. But at the end of the day, it's about pitching innings and not giving up runs. And yeah, I'll take a 3.66 ERA. And also, again, this is a floor riser type of relief pitcher, established guy. He's not going to cost much. The Twins really haven't had a second lefty, even if they bring back Rogers. A guy like that would be nice. And with the no 3-batter minimum rule, it's nice to see him put up good numbers in 2020 without that. So sign all the relievers. I'm giving thumbs up to we're signing everybody tonight.
Well, I think one thing that, might honestly end up happening with a lot of these guys is that contending teams who have some open bullpen spots, I think a place like the Twins, honestly, is going to be very attractive to these free agent relievers. The Twins could bring in a whole bunch of guys on non-guaranteed kind of contracts. So got a lot of these guys who sort of end up standing at the end of the musical chairs and take a look at them. I don't think Wilson's going to get a minor league deal, but I think guys would maybe take less to come here, or be swayed here, based on other circumstances, because there's a pretty clear path to some high leverage innings on what's likely to be a playoff team. So I like it. Let's move to the final tier. It's our sleeper tier. So these are kind of guys that we expect to maybe be kind of around at the end of the off season, maybe looking for a low incentive laden guaranteed deal or even a minor league contract, because either they're coming off a year lost to injury, or, they just haven't proven much, or, for whatever reason. It's a deep market. There's going to be a lot of guys who are going to end up in a tough spot. So we're going to let Tom kick this one off. Now, Tom goes with Brandon Klein. I assume that Tom's strategy here was akin to, a major league team when they have a open spot in the rotation coming, and then they just call up like some incredibly random minor leaguer that no one's ever heard of, so the other team can't scout him at all. Because I was like, who is Brandon Klein? I don't know. I looked him up, and he's got very little major league experience, 29 years old. I have like no Oppo research on him, but I'm curious to hear what Tom has to say about why he likes Brandon Klein.
This is a guy who caught my eye based mainly off of his velocity, but the more I learned about this guy, the more I started to like him. And this is a guy who I think will be available on a minor league deal, just to be clear. And those guys are the best. I mean, there's guys you can bring him in. They don't take up a spot on your 40-man roster. It's like playing with free money, essentially. So anything you can get out of these type of pitchers is a big plus. This is a guy, he was a second-round pick by Baltimore back in 2012. So he's been in their organization since then. They outrighted him off their roster. He is a free agent now. You can see where, the guy they drafted, they've held on to him for this long. They obviously liked him, but there gets to be fatigue. We've seen this with the Twins too. I mean, Hendriks is a guy you could throw in this bucket. At a certain point, you just kind of say it's not working. We're going to move on. But he, again, former second-round pick, so he's a pretty high-profile guy. He's a guy who was in Baltimore's top 30 prospect list at one point. Then he has elbow surgery and misses not only 2016, but also 2017. He has not one but 2 cleanup procedures on that elbow during that time. So 3 total elbow procedures keeps him out. He returns. Baltimore likes him enough to keep them on their 40-man. He has a really great year out of the bullpen in the minor leagues in 2018. Petit makes his major league debut against the Twins in 2019. I mean, come on, guys. You never heard of this guy? He made his debut against the Twins.
Did he shut us down?
Supposed to be Twins daily.
I remember this. Actually, it's funny. I remember this guy because he gave up a monster home run to Nelson Cruz. Just an absolutely ridiculous. It was during that series where I guess they thanked him all that season, but in Camden where they're just hitting home run after home run, you're like, my God, this is just getting ridiculous.
Welcome to the big leagues, kid.
Yeah.
So he's 29. He's pitched in 37 MLB games. He has a 5.48 ERA. That doesn't really stand out to you. However, in 2019, his average fastball velocity was 96.3 miles per hour. That ranked 28th out of the 197 relief pitchers who pitched 40 or more innings. That is the top 14% among relievers, not among all pitchers. That's top 14% among relievers. So this guy has a hot fastball. His slider's gotten good reviews at certain points over his career. So, yeah, on a minor league deal, they just picked up Ian Gibaut and Brandon Waddell, who are sort of in the same classification of like, what, who. So the Twins clearly kind of like these guys who, if they don't have really necessarily any kind of a MLB resume, there's still something there to like with them.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Brandon Klein because he's the kind of player we don't really have much opportunity to talk about in this free agent discussion. A lot of these guys are, of course, veteran players who've played through their service time and they're hitting the market. We're talking about a lot of guys in their 30s here who've pitched tons of innings in the majors. But the Twins have shown that they like to grab a project, take them on, and see what they can do. We saw it with Matt Whistler, and as you mentioned, they pulled in a couple guys off waivers. I would expect that one of those guys will make their team next year. They don't take these guys for nothing. They see something that they like, and I don't know if Klein stands out to them in that way, but you give a good case for why he might. And in that way, he's very intriguing. Usually, you only get those kinds of guys off waivers, but here he is in free agency. I don't know if being outrighted by the Orioles is a great thing to go in your favor, but
leaving Baltimore has worked out very well for Dylan Bundy and Kevin Gausman. So
that is an extremely valid point. Matt, do you have any thoughts on Brandon Klein? I know you're the world's foremost Brandon Klein expert.
Well, maybe I'm second behind Tom. Although, side note, Gausman also had to leave Atlanta to become good.
And I think he had one other stop too in there.
Cincinnati, yes. Yeah, I just remember that. Why do I know this? That is weird.
Blake says, who?
Yeah. So when it comes to these kind of guys, I think, Nick, you talked about Matt Whistler. Really, with these kind of flyer guys, you're just looking at one tool or two and then kind of seeing like, okay, let's see if we can take advantage of that, maybe expand it a little bit and just find some sort of niche for you. And like Tom said with Klein, you see an average fastball velocity, 96. Last year's 95. That's good enough. That means a little less these days as everyone's throwing 95. It's actually kind of insane. But still, if you can either find command, retool an off-speed pitch, maybe tell him to nix a changeup or something, just kind of find something to do. I mean, it's a low downside thing. Because if he doesn't, then you just let him go. And if he does, hey, now you have Matt Whistler 2.0. You're never going to give him a fully guaranteed contract. So it's just kind of like, you're like, why not? Why not do this? So I guess I'd be fine with Klein.
Yeah, I mean, why not is the answer here. I mean, as Tom mentioned, this guy's probably going to be available on a minor league contract. Bring him in. Let's take a look. This Twins front office and developmental unit is kind of well known for their philosophy of let's find someone who does one thing really well, and we can work around the rest. So I think this is a good example, and Tom's picking someone who is very much in the Twins kind of wheelhouse. I like it, even though I still don't know who the heck he is. Matt goes with his second pick. He's going with Nate Jones, the guy who I think will be quite a bit more familiar to Twins fans. Pitched with the White Sox for quite a while. We're familiar with that high velocity fastball, that nasty stuff, big strikeout rates with the White Sox. He pitched with the Reds last year, and he had a tough season. 18 2/3 innings, 6.27 ERA, 1.66 WHIP, but still got the strikeouts, 11.1 K per nine, and only 2.9 walks. So the peripheral's not too bad. He's 34. Why did you pick Nate Jones here as sort of your wild card pick? Obviously, he is probably going to be available coming off this tough year at a fairly low dollar amount.
Well, one of the big reasons, if I'm being honest, was when I was looking through the list of probable guys, I was like, wow, I don't like any of these guys, except for Nate Jones, because I recognized him from being on the White Sox. But I guess the skinny on him, obviously, like you said, Nick, high velocity guy, had big strikeout numbers with the White Sox, was never actually really their closer, which was interesting. They always had another guy in front of him, like Addison Reed. It comes full circle. But the big knock for him has been he's just been completely unable to stay healthy. I think the last time he threw 60 innings was like 5 years ago. He's had elbow problem after elbow problem. I think he had Tommy John. I'm not entirely sure. But, the stuff's still there. You look at those numbers, 11.1 K per nine. That's legit, even if the ERA and the WHIP are ugly. So I don't imagine a whole lot of teams going to be clamoring for a 34-year-old who can't stay healthy and has a high ERA. But again, you take a flyer on him, maybe the elbow holds up, and you find some of that nasty stuff again. And, hey, now you got another good reliever in your bullpen, and you barely had to try and go get him.
Yeah, I think this is kind of another, just like the last one, why not? I have a hard time believing that anyone's going to give Nate Jones even a guaranteed deal, honestly. As you mentioned, the durability has been an issue. I don't think there's going to be a ton of teams clamoring for him, but there could be some teams like the Twins who see that upside and they're intrigued, and I could see him maybe gravitating towards the Twins, seeing them have some success, being maybe a little familiar with them from the AL Central. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, we watched Jones he was just so good for the White Sox for so many years. I hated watching him come in against the Twins because I was like, it's going to be tough, man. Tom, what's your vibe on Nate Jones? How does he hit you as an option?
Yeah, I mean, if he's going to be available on a minor league deal, which when we look at the whole bulk of this market, it's pretty hard to imagine with so many other options out there that he would get a major league deal. Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. And, the guys like this, they do pop back up every once in a while where, the guy has a great year and then kind of is lost for a few years. And then all of a sudden there he is again, contributing on a team. And I guess, to go back to the Gausman-Cincinnati connection, that team established a relationship with Driveline Baseball about a year ago, which is like the forefront, most progressive, pitching factory that there is. So we know that this guy is going to be very familiar with all the technology that Wes Johnson and the Twins are using. And maybe even he was on the verge of some kind of a connection, some kind of a breakthrough, and just didn't get the opportunity to get to that point in 2020. But 2021 is the year where it kind of all connects. So, yeah, definitely an interesting name at this sort of bottom tier, take a flyer on a guy tier.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring him in and he's able to get healthy and get back anywhere close to where he was, I mean, what a find. That's a back-end reliever that would be hugely valuable to the Twins. So speaking of bringing it full circle, as Matt was talking about here, we're going to go to our last name. Matt mentioned Nate Jones wasn't really a closer for the Chicago White Sox. He was behind guys like Addison Reed and David Robertson. My final pick here in the last tier. Pitched with the Phillies, didn't pitch in 2020. He underwent Tommy John surgery. He's 35. Now, the reason I thought that David Robertson would be interesting to bring up in this discussion is because he's basically the banner example of why you should not spend money on relief pitchers in free agency. He signed a pretty big, high-dollar deal with the Phillies, and he pitched barely at all over the last 2 years. He injured his elbow. He missed his whole year rehabbing. So it's not unthinkable to me that he could get a guaranteed deal of some couple million maybe from someone just because of his track record. I mean, he's been phenomenal over the course of his year. He's been so good for so long. He's another guy that Twins fans have seen plenty of, whether it was with the White Sox or the Yankees. He's dominant. He's super dominant, and he's a little bit of a, being at his age in the mid-30s, coming off almost 2 fully missed years. He is definitely a lotto ticket, but a guy with a ton of upside in my mind, who could maybe step up and become a part of that late inning picture. Tom, do you agree?
He's not a guy I would want to give a 40-man roster spot to, a major league deal to, but yeah, I mean, I love that you brought that up, that he's like the shining example of why you go digging into the budget barrel. But if one of the things that's really nice about the Twins is if we think of, from his perspective, he's 35. Okay, he's trying to come back and pitch, and I'm sure he doesn't want to pitch for the Pirates or some team that he knows is going to be garbage. So he's looking for an opportunity to pitch on a team that has a chance. So if it is a situation where he's not able to find a guaranteed contract, and he's kind of looking for an opportunity to where he can prove himself in spring training, I would imagine from his perspective, the Twins would be a pretty attractive landing place for him. So, yeah, I mean, as a flyer, I like it.
I agree. We talked earlier. We've talked a few times about how the Twins just kind of have, I think, an advantage over other teams that are maybe willing to spend similar amounts, which is maybe not much on relief pitching, because there's going to be opportunities here to pitch for a true contending team and get that late inning role. Matt, what do you think about David Robertson?
He's an interesting case. I can't think of any other guys who have had such a history of success that you could also really call a wild card, because he does fit both bills. Obviously, it was a long-time reliever for the Yankees, was so good. But you look at 6 2/3 innings over the last 2 years, and you said pitched a little bit in 2019. I distinctly remember him walking a guy with the bases loaded to end up in a walk-off, which is always hilarious. Rough stuff.
Literal walk-off.
Literal walk-off. The only appropriate time we should call it a walk-off. I mean, come on, guys. Let's get our vernacular correct. But if you can net him for a minor league deal, something not guaranteed, I'm not sure how that plays out. I don't know if some other team will give him a major league deal. But if you can net him for minor league one, I don't see why not. just only last note on him is I vaguely remember him wanting to lean towards playing in the East Coast, I believe, when he was originally a free agent. I think that was kind of a big talking point because I know a lot of Twins fans really wanted him. And he was sort of like, I'm not even thinking about your state. And then, of course, he signed with Philadelphia, who are on the East Coast. So I don't know. I don't know if you can still hold
That seals it. He's dead to me.
Well, I don't know how much.
Get him out of here. Terrible pick, Nick.
Well,
Terrible.
why would you appreciate the East Coast? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
A lot of people do. From what I don't know.
Why would you go to a team in a state? Their state votes correctly. Let's get on with this. What was I gonna get to? But I don't know if you can hold the same demand.
You said something about boats.
boats. Hey, I know that. I'm on the West Coast. I don't know if you can hold demands of the 35-year-old who didn't pitch last year. But I guess I'm getting really too long in this. So long story short, again, also kind of in the why not boat. I'm just really not sure with him. He's kind of a really unique case out of all the guys we've looked at.
I agree. There are a few guys like that. I mean, Kirby Yates kind of falls into a similar bucket. There's several guys who have huge track records as superstar relief pitchers, and their value's down a little bit, and the value of the market is way down. So there's just interesting opportunities that are going to be happening. Our guy Seth Stows of Twins Daily mentioned side topic, MLB trade rumors predicting Trevor May to the Giants for 2 years and $14 million. Your thoughts? That sounds about right to me. And
I'd give it to him if I was a Twin.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting because I am on record as saying I would rather keep Trevor May than Taylor Rogers. I think he is a better bet going forward, and we think Rogers is going to make like $7 million, and you've got 2 years of control over him. I mean, the only difference there is you're guaranteeing that second year, I guess. But yeah, I'm a huge Trevor May guy, so I would do that if I was the Twins.
I wonder how much do they give Mark Melancon again? Do I got to go check or?
So the one thing that does worry me about Trevor May is as good as he is, and has his strikeouts has increased. He's a great velo guy. He did give up 5 home runs in 23 and a third innings this season. Mm-hmm. He gave up 8 home runs in 2019. He gave up 4 home runs in only 25 and a third innings in 2018. So he will pitch at the top of the zone. I do think his pitch mix has also changed this season. That may be something that he was sort of evolving as the season went on this year. But that does worry me because that's easily the most sort of disaster potential is having a reliever who gives up a bunch of home runs.
That's absolutely valid. Yeah. So one thing we like to do to close this out, we've gone through all our names, and great arguments made there. Tom and Matt, thank you very much. We pull up this little payroll spender projection tool here that we have at you can get to it through twinspayroll.com. It's a little spreadsheet thing that we set up. Our guy, Matthew Taylor, helped us put it together of Twins Daily. And it's pretty fun to play around with. It gives you a look at the Twins sort of skeleton 2021 roster. Gives you a bunch of options and what we think they might cost. Granted, these are all guesses. And as we've discussed, the relief pitching guesses are the most toughest guesses of all because this market is just very difficult to predict. But so what I've kind of done here to set it up is I took an approach elsewhere that I think is pretty feasible of what the Twins might do. Kept Nelson Cruz for $14 million. We're letting Eddie go. We got Kirilloff in left at the minimum. We got Cave as our 4th outfielder. You sign a Kike Hernandez, someone like that to refill that Marwin Gonzalez role in the $7 million range. Maybe Adrianza as your second utility guy. Jeffers is the backup catcher. Taking a Drew Smiley in this example in that 4th SP spot, anyone in that kind of, Homer Bailey type of range, I think they're going to go for maybe under $5 million in this market, and then just Dobnak at the minimum filling that 5th spot. So with Duffy, Whistler, and Alcala as our guys here in the bullpen, and I'll just go ahead and lock in Thielbar for $1 million because I think that's basically a given at that price. We've got the Twins kind of payroll threshold projection here set at $125 million. That's a 10% reduction from 2020. I think that's pretty reasonable. It's probably going to go down. It might go down more than that. Might go down less. So that's just kind of our best guess. If you go in here and play with the tool, you can pick some different sort of thresholds to use as your cap. But if we use that kind of, I think, a reasonable estimate, we got about $13.5 million in spending money to refill the rest of this bullpen here, which is about half the spots, if they go with an 8-man bullpen. So if you keep Taylor Rogers at $7 million, you're using about half that money. So that's, I think, an interesting way to kind of look at the Rogers decision. And then all of a sudden, if you take a guy like, I don't know, if you took a Trevor May, you're already done. You can maybe get 2 guys on the minimum. Not a lot of depth necessarily, but that's not a bad bullpen. There's some other guys that we mentioned here, Justin Wilson for $4 million, a little cheaper, gives you a little more money to spend on those last couple spots. Guys like Soria, I know our guy Nash was stumping for Soria. Of course, Clippard, going to be an option to bring back. Romo, we think they'll go in that $3 million range. But we kind of talked about, Yates maybe $8 million. So that's okay. Well, that'd be tough to do with Rogers. You take Rogers out, I don't know. Then you got a little more money to spend on something. You put probably not Littell, probably Stashak or something. But it's going to be tough as it becomes clear here if you want to go get a guy like. And these numbers I don't think have been turned down yet. But I don't think we think that obviously Hand is not going to get $12 million. I don't think Hendriks is even going to get $13 million. But that's one of those things that consumes your whole sort of bullpen stash there. So I don't know, Tom, as you sort of look at this picture and break down the bullpen, compared to the rest of the team and thinking about the spending money that we have available, what do you kind of view as the right approach to the bullpen? Are you going to go for that big, one of those guys like we talked about in that first step, those high caliber guys that's going to maybe eat up a very large percentage of that spending money? Are you more about spreading it out? And also, where do you stand on Taylor Rogers and keeping him?
I think just given the state where the bullpen's at, they should keep Rogers. Right. He pitched a lot better than the numbers suggest, in my opinion. If you go back and look at all the hits he gave up, a lot of them were not very hard hit. It's not like he was crushed. And I think actually kind of the fun way that I like to look at this conversation is actually by looking at the position player side. And let's pretend like we have this $125 million budget. Would we really want Josh Donaldson at 20? If we had a choice, would we really want Josh Donaldson at $21 million? Or would we rather have 3 other players at $7 million? That's sort of the argument that I'd say against signing Liam Hendriks is that, do you really want that guy? And then you're really handcuffed into maybe trying to make something out of Brandon Klein as to where it wouldn't be the cherry on top, making one of those guys into the next match. It'd be like, you have to do it at that point. And also kind of along those same lines, listen, Kike Hernandez, I get it. He makes all the sense in the world to the Twins, but when you go through this sort of a payroll, when you really break it down, it doesn't make sense for the Twins to spend $7 million on what's basically going to amount to a bench player. I realize that they did that with Marwin, but it's kind of a weird way to look at it. But I think if you look at the position players in that sense, it kind of that you can apply that same logic to the bullpen in that. It makes a lot more sense to stretch it out into more guys and really put all your eggs into one basket and then hope again for another Whistler, that the guy you pluck out and who really shines, and then hope again for another Alcala, who's a guy in your system who kind of comes up as well. Maybe Edouard Colina is that guy next year, but there's always somebody that kind of steps up.
Yeah, I mean, you just know they're going to discover a guy or two who just breaks out that we've never heard of. I memean, we've seen them do it several times, and it's what this front office was brought in to do. They have some skills on that front, and they're getting better at it with Wes Johnson around. I think that what we've kind of seen in this discussion is that you can bring in some high upside guys without spending or guaranteeing a ton of money. So I think there's a very good argument to be made for that approach. Matt, how about you? What is as you walk away from this, what are you thinking is going to be your approach to the bullpen, and how much of your funds do you want to allocate to it?
So my approach to the bullpen is it more than anything should be almost entirely homegrown. I think it's just a more efficient way of doing it. And I think it's just, we see a lot of the best bullpens. The Rays bullpen, it was entirely made up of guys they either developed or guys like Nick Anderson, guys like Peter Fairbanks that they identified from other teams and bought them early. And we're like, we're going to give up some other players for that maybe because we know we can turn you into something. And now they have both of those guys, great relievers for very little, and they're going to have them for very little for a long time. And then once those guys need to make them, all right, out you go. We're going to cycle in new guys, and that's just how they do it. So maybe the Twins aren't going to go to that extreme of a level, but I think they should follow in that blueprint. You do sign a Romo or a Clippard type occasionally when you do need to fill a gap, when you don't have faith that well, maybe we don't have a Cody Stashak. Maybe we don't think Edouard Kalina can be that kind of guy. And maybe we don't want to Brustar Gratterall him into the bullpen or a Fernando Romero him to the bullpen if you want to go more extreme.
My gosh.
Remember him? Yeah, I know, right? He was the top 100 prospect. People forget.
Still around.
So,
yeah.
Is he? I don't even know, man.
I don't. No one knows. I have no idea. No one knows what his deal is. I don't think.
That's actually an interesting storyline to follow. But if we can even. But anyways, so pretty much, I'm just going to stick to what I say. You don't spend big. You're big. The highest you're going to go. The highest I'd personally go is Brad Hand. I'd stick with my bread and butter. Go with guys like Tommy Hunter. Go with guys that use Petit, and then you say. We have faith that maybe one of our minor league deals can step up. Maybe a guy we have AAA can step up, and that's going to be our bullpen. We don't really want to go and try and build the Yankees bullpen because you can't do it. You can't sign Adam Ottavino and Zach Britton and Aroldis Chapman. You just can't do it as the Twins.
I want to piggyback off that. One more. So the way, if you watch the postseason, it's clearly obvious that bullpens are becoming more and more important. Therefore, none of us are penciling Joan Duran into the rotation. And I think there's honestly a potential that if you were just to say, screw it, we're putting Duran into the bullpen out the gate. This is a guy who throws 98 miles per hour as a starter. There's a potential, going back to that homegrown option, that could be the best guy that anybody adds to their bullpen all off season potentially. And, we still think of things as like a failed starter, a guy ending up in the bullpen is sort of a failure as a developmental. But when you're looking at how teams are managing in the postseason, I mean, it could end up in that we're not penciling him into the rotation. And this is a team in a competitive cycle. It might make sense to take one of those top pitching prospects and stick him in the bullpen and see what happens.
Great point. I'd argue, go for it, Tom.
I'd argue that with how horrible bullpens went for a lot of teams in the postseason, we're going to start seeing influx starting pitching becoming more valuable. But I think that's a different argument. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that.
Or starters who pitch in relief and shut you down like Framber Valdez.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Awesome stuff. Brad says that Taylor Rogers has peaked. That is very possible and something the Twins need to protect against, I think, as they build their bullpen for next year. Ron says, great show, guys. I love talking Twins. Front office has many difficult choices to make this offseason, and that's something that has become clear through all these episodes we've done. We've now gone through starting pitching, DH and outfield, infield and catcher. If you go back to Offseason Live, if you go to our podcast, our YouTube channel, you can go back and watch all these episodes if you missed them. And there's difficult choices to be made. The Twins have a lot of guys who they could potentially lose in the bullpen and elsewhere. They're going to have to try to figure out if they want to bring those guys back, replace them. They've got a limited amount of funds. And so we're just getting started. I think it's going to be a slow start to this offseason. Free agency is underway. There's been little action, but we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep analyzing things as they happen here on Offseason Live. So we hope you'll check in with us next time. We're going to be doing some trade targets, I think, in our next episode. That'll be exciting. We'll be unpacking some wacky trade scenarios and coming up with ideas that we think maybe would work for the Twins. That's another way to acquire talent, which will maybe be, I think trades are going to be a very, very popular way to acquire talent at a reasonable cost this offseason. And we'll do some offseason blueprints, and we got a bunch of other stuff in store. So we appreciate everyone joining us tonight. We appreciate the comments. Of course, we appreciate Tom and Matt bringing it here with some great names that they stood by. Tom, any final thoughts on the bullpen as the Twins seek to bring back? The Twins were tied with the Rays for the best Fangraphs wins above replacement in baseball at 3.6 this year. I think people underrate what a critical aspect that was of their division championship. Any thoughts on how they can make sure that they are keeping that a strength without maybe, as you said, throwing a ton of money at it?
I do think that this front office and probably a little bit Rocco Baldelli deserves some credit as well. I think they have some things down pretty well just on they're very specific, I feel like, on what they're looking for. So I feel like you almost have to kind of hand it to them at this point that they know what they're doing. But just, to wrap it up, just want to thank everybody for checking in and hanging out with us. And I'm going to have some of the worst, you're just going to hate my trade ideas so much next week that you need to tune in.
Come pick them apart.
Someone needs to tell me I'm wrong. I need someone to tell me I'm wrong.
Absolutely. Seth here says Brad Hand is the reason you keep Rodgers. Bullpen guys have tough stretches. Hand was bad for more than a half a season, but great most of the time. It's actually a great point. I mean, we just talked about how Hand had a tough second half in 2019, had a tough start, but he had the opportunity to get himself back on track. Rodgers in the short season, if we play a full season this year, maybe Rodgers has an amazing second half. We're not even talking about him as any kind of question mark. Matt, as we look at the bullpen scenario ahead of us, what are kind of your final parting thoughts about how you want the Twins to attack it?
I guess my final thought was it hit me more so as we were talking about this and as you were playing around with the blueprint tool, that it really is sort of an urgent, maybe the most urgent. I know you said you thought it was the most. I don't know if I'm on that board yet, but certainly an urgent area of need going into the offseason. So, yeah, they're going to have to attack it. I know I kind of said earlier I thought Trevor May was not as big of a loss. I think I'm coming around. I think his loss is going to be huge. Same with Clippard if they don't resign him. So, yeah, you're looking at high leverage arms that are either going to cost a lot of money now or no longer be with the team. And that's not easy to replace.
Agreed. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I mean, Ron said it all. It's going to be some tough choices ahead, and we're excited to follow it. So thank you, everybody. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube. Come to twinsdaily.com. Read the great work by people like Tom and Matt. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Have a great night.